Welcome to the Flow of Money podcast.
This is where high performance meets financial intelligence. In these discussions, we combine the performance science of flow and flow states with practical wealth management strategies.
The intent is to build a resource for those who believe that high performance mental states can impact wealth and abundance in all its forms so that you can make the impact you want in the time that you have.
Let's get started. I'm Dave Gieselman, flow state coach, breathwork facilitator, and former chef turned high performance nerd. I help leaders and creatives build clarity, confidence, and capacity, teaching the science of staying cool under pressure so you can think clearly and execute fast, especially when things go sideways.
My name is John O'Dea, and I'm a financial advisor. My love is cash flow. I truly love the cash flow generated by businesses for the positive impact that this cash flow can have on the owners, their employees, and their broader community. And this cash flow is never more important than when the owners of these businesses start to execute their exit and succession plan. I just love it all and can't wait to help.
Let's talk about it.
So, my instinct tells me that the more volatile a market gets, that the more volatile a sort of global or regional, a US right now financial situation gets, the more people are kind of locked in to watching that jagged line grow ever more jagged.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think the viewership, if you were to track that, the clicks, the views, the length of views, the viewership, what was the system that could check how many times you picked up your phone?
Right.
Those numbers would all spike during periods of stress, regardless of the situation, right? And most of the sources of data love that, right? They want you to be as stressed as possible because that's how they generate revenue, right? Eyeballs on pages, right? When those numbers increase, the length of time increases, they get to charge more per eyeball. So I think as the stimulus response is triggered, sympathetic nervous system, I think you can correct me, right?
Yeah.
We're into the sympathetic nervous system when we're triggering that initial response, brings with it, both, potential positive and negative, but just as a basic level, it brings energy, right? Where some people like to go watch, comedies or horror films. If your entertainment triggers some sort of response, you're getting something from that, right? Watching the instability associated with the change in value, often associated with your favorite enemy of whatever it is.
Right.
Shake your fist at whoever your
This
news
fucking
tribe,
guy, right.
Whatever your news tribe is feeding up to you as your enemy other, as the source of the problem, will trigger lots of attention, right? And gather or can without a strategy or a process or an approach. And so during periods of stress in particular, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, there's some shoulds, right? During periods of instability, stress, and surprise, you should have a strategy, like break in case of emergency. What's your response when information is brought to you that is surprising, right? That has an effect on your situation. In any situation, right? If blood starts oozing from your eyeballs, what's your process? That's surprising.
Right.
I'm a little disconcerted.
Right.
We just went through this in my family in a couple of different ways, but somebody in my family was experiencing symptoms that started out minor and then she was in the emergency room. It was just, what's your strategy during those times? So during periods of stress and instability, especially those that affect things that are so closely aligned with lots of people's identity, such as wealth, money, cash, right? It is super important at those times to check in. What does this mean? And that's to some degree what people are looking for. What's the data, the insight, the conclusions? Are there strategies or recommendations? That's typically not what they're getting when they're checking in. But that's to some degree what they're interested in, right? If the stock market is measured by the S&P 500 is down a bunch, whatever the news tribe is that you subscribe to suggests
Sure.
a bunch means, then all of a sudden out trots, face after face, providing some sort of entertainment value around the causes or meaning or implications or how this could be worse or it's going to be fine, right? I mean, it's an emotional roller coaster that they're trying to trigger, I mean, there's probably a news formula around it, the shit sandwich, right? We're going to make you feel good that, there's going to be a puppy, and then there's going to be the stock market has crashed, you're going to run out of money, and then there's going to be a puppy at the end, right? There'll be some sort of mix or blend of news cycle awareness. So I think in a nervous system regulation process, it is very hard to thwart the initial reaction. Wait, what? Whatever it is. Wait, what? And then the question is there a gap large enough for you to jump in and redirect that energy in some fashion such that you can employ your strategy, checklist, emergency preparedness process, right?
The thing that I have set up so that when the unknown, the unexpected, the unknown happens, I'm like, oh yeah, when the unforeseeable, unexpected, completely unknown thing happens, I am going to employ this strategy.
Yeah, because I think there's plenty of data to suggest that real opportunity does open up during periods of volatility, right? Bouncing up and down, right?
For sure. We look at this in leadership, right? When the shit hits the fan,
yes,
right? Humans look for the calmest person in the room.
Yes.
And that is the opportunity that opens up for someone to get real chill real fast.
Yes.
Right? And not calm because they're checked out, not calm because they don't care, because we recognize that. Like I see,
yes.
like I can clock that. Right. But humans look for the calmest person in the room, because the calmest person in the room, we attribute to them information they may or may not have.
Sure.
Right. So,
but at least
this person is calm for a reason.
Stable and regulated, physical system such that maybe they will have, even if they don't have more information, skill, training, data, insight, their ability to slow, right? Slow, smooth is fast, right? The ability to slow and potentially de-energize whatever is present. And again, with practice, with focus, with some skill around handling energized situations, even without real insight, just a calm execution of the strategy that we talked about and planned for, right? And you see this in all sorts of situations, right? And in high consequence environments, I don't know how many backup plans you have, right? I mean, if you are building a rocket, how many backup failure systems do you need to have in place such that your humans come home? And how many things need to fail to be ready, right? And so how do you deal with those situations such that when it goes sideways, you practiced to some degree? Your heart can't stop the heart rate from initially changing. Like this is a life-threatening situation based on your initial reaction, right? And my sympathetic nervous system is going to react. I don't necessarily, I personally don't have the skills to avoid that initial reaction, but could I leverage the opportunities present in any of those situations because I have some techniques that I can apply and I've prepared a set of steps that I can deliver? And again, it's one of those, during periods of stress and instability, you don't raise to the level of your hopes, you fall to the level of your skill and training, right? So when things go sideways, were you ready with the surprise? And so I think that's some of what we're seeing is for a lot of folks, their identity, using like the sports metaphors, are coming up a lot on my feed right now, right? In terms of speakers and experts. And if your reward center as a young athlete was centered on winning, right, then the risk of failure becomes a debilitating process, right? And your contests, right, when things go sideways, and in many ways, they're going to go sideways in ways outside of your control. The tilt of the universe, the wind, a fucking seagull, like it doesn't, umpires, your opponents are, they just everything align. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons why things can fail to go your direction. And if your identity is vested in the outcome outside of your control, as opposed to the process, and that's, you can see, high performance individuals start to crumple, right? And if you can vest your identity in the flow present in those high consequence moments for the experience. And one of the authors was talking about what they missed most about their contest was those large stretches of time where they connected to the infinite inside them because they were fully expressing everything about them on their field of whatever it was, right? And they didn't have a replacement flow, trigger, high consequence, the effort skill gap, the real measurable feedback. They didn't have a replacement, and now they're just missing flow. Like Csikszentmihalyi, they're starving, right? Their emotional regulation is starving because they don't have those flow experiences anymore. So the same is true in money, right?
I think you're right when you talk about those outcomes, things that are like outcome based, like the winning. And Kobe Bryant was famous for talking about, somebody asked him if he was upset after a game, because they lost. He goes, no, it's a game. You win some, you lose some. I'm upset when I don't do my best. I'm upset when my team doesn't perform. Wins and losses happen. This is basketball. You're gonna play, better than 100 games in a year. Your losses are going to come. If you beat yourself up after every loss, it's kind of tough. So the question is did I do my best? And so
like apply that from a wealth perspective, right? And this idea of the brittle or fragile nature of the outcome orientation, right? You could imagine if your outcome orientation was a wealth number, right? And as you get closer to that number, now all of a sudden it's no longer getting there and the systems and processes that you followed to get there. It's the fear of the loss associated with that, right? Now all of a sudden we are sowing the seeds, because again, that outcome from a wealth perspective is itself a very fragile outcome. Very important things can happen in the universe that affect your ability to experience that wealth, right? You could have a concentrated position in an individual company that just gets wiped out for whatever reason. You could health issue. You could tax law change. Right? I have a client who is, their revenue is tied to the import and export of products that is caught up in this process, and they're going to get wiped out. And if their identity from a value perspective is tied to the outcomes, all they're doing is risk management. They're not co-creating, right, in a process that they used to get where they were, right? If their flow, if their joy, if their lessons learned are outcome-based and not process-based, it becomes a very fragile wealth situation. This comes up in estate planning conversations all the time and, ruining your kid conversations all the time. Like,
sure,
for a lot of primary initial wealth creators, there's some of the drive is on the surface outward facing. I want to do well for the benefit of others. And others is typically kids. I would like my kids to have it easier than I did. And so generation one creates a great deal of wealth with some of that energy being produced by that other focused energy. I work really hard in a grimy and dirty business. I missed out on a lot of stuff, but I'm doing it. I'm sacrificing such that my kids don't have to. Right? And then you find when they're 30, they never struggled and are now handicapped as a result. Right? They never, because they had so much, they never actually learned the lessons that was the estate gift.
Right.
The identity, the lessons, the thought process, the grit, the visioning of goal, whatever the generation one from a wealth creator standpoint was able to produce to get to that level. It isn't the financial outcome that was important. It was the mindset that they used to get there. And so all of a sudden we're worried about, the estate tax that's going to apply to that is 40% and all these resources go away. In my perspective, the beauty of the gift of the estate is not the stuff, right? It's the culture and the values and the mindset and the lessons and the stories and the, and the processes that the wealth creators use to get there. That's the gift of the wealth transfer. If you want 10 generations from now for there to be success present in a fashion that carries forward, it's not the number, right? Because with disheartening regularity, the wealth creator's third generation is spending the last dollar, right? Generation two might be doctors and lawyers, right? Because they overemphasized education. You know, you got to go to college, you got to get a good education, you got to get a job, do something better than I did, blah, 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 and never learned these lessons of financial hardship and underspending the resources that you make and scraping by and the overemphasizing. And so all of a sudden, Generation 2 has a lot of resources because of what Generation 1 did, but they also are not teaching Generation 3. And Generation 3 is very far removed from the lessons.
Right.
Generation 2 at least saw some of it and gets a contact high, right? But Generation 3 is so far from it that by Generation 4, we have reset back to the beginning.
So let's take our current world right now, because I think this is a really great like way to look at this. To borrow from like and I'm gonna go ahead and say it. I'm gonna leak some of my personal beliefs out. I'm gonna bleed it out a little bit. So the sort of the manosphere sort of bro podcast, kind of leaning, one of the things they always kind of revert back to, the Joe Rogans, and this saying that hard times create or the hard times create hard men create good times create soft men create hard times, right? And it's funny because I hear that, and I always hear it kind of being pointed at. First it was like millennials, and then kind of Gen Z.
Sure. Entitlement mentality,
right,
affluenza. Yep.
Yeah. All this thing. And as I get older, I'm like, and I'm observing this, the greatest generation and the silent generation were the hard men that created good times. The boomers are the soft men created by those good times who had all the benefits of those and then pulled the ladder up behind them. Gen X, you and I,
yep,
we are that Generation 3 that got to kind of witness, we knew our grandfathers, we knew that generation, we understood.
But not well. Yep.
And understood the struggle. And what we saw was the benefits of what they built in our parents. And I got to experience a lot of the privilege that came with that. I had opportunity for education.
Yes.
I didn't take that opportunity,
right.
but I did it. And now we look at my son, Generation 4. My son is a Gen Alpha, right? My son is a Gen Alpha, and I'm watching him have very little access to the things that my grandfather built, the opportunities that my grandfather built, that our parents like pulled the ladder up behind them on. A lot of the opportunities for education, a lot of the opportunities for home ownership, a lot of the opportunities for building pensions, all of these things. And I'm just kind of watching this and going, I don't think you get to be upset at the entitled for the world you presented them and then rug pulled. Right.
Sure.
Here's the world that you grow in. By the way, now it's the Starbucks and the avocado toast is why you can't buy a home. Look, father, by the time my dad was 24, he had 4 kids and a mortgage. Right. And they recently did an evaluation to have a job with the same sort of buying power, like to have a minimum wage with the same type of buying power that my father's minimum wage job had in like 1970.
Yep.
It'd be like $70-something an hour.
Yes. Yep.
Minimum wage.
Yes.
Right. That is beginning wage. That is McDonald's, right? That is McDonald's fry cook or floor mopper beginning wage.
Yeah. I mean, what's the question, right? So we can layer, my example of the estate planning gift.
Right.
Part of the sadness that I see in my practice around money counseling, tax planning, estate planning, people with resources, was to point out that the the resource that is the most valuable is not necessarily the financial resource. Now, I will not stand here and say that it's not helpful, right? Because again, but above a certain threshold, the resource in and of itself, without being paired or coupled to some of the things that you and I are exploring, the ability to seek out in a productive and sustainable fashion an important goal over long periods of time, financial, physical, emotional, spiritual, wherever you want to see, productive.
The cultivation of resilience.
Right. That resilience and grit in many respects, is as or more important than any financial resource that you start with. Right. So
100%.
Part of the gap that we're seeing, and you see it in an individualized basis, you see it on a macro basis, you're bringing the macro, right? And I think the macro and the micro match, right? Within a family, if there's reluctance, inability, misguided, hey, I'm doing this so that my kids don't have to, right? Where I'm out in front of my kids such they never skin their knee, right? Such they never experience hardship, such that they never struggle in any capacity, right? That this butterfly effect. If you crack open the cocoons and let the butterfly out, it dies, right? It's in some of that process of struggle that creates the process that makes them successful.
Right. First stage of the flow cycle is struggle, is resistance.
Right.
You got to go through it in order to have it.
Yes. And I think, when layered on generationally, right, the kids that we're launching into the workforce, what are the skills, so if you break down things required to be successful in any endeavor, there's things we can teach you, right? Skills, knowledge, language, tool, right? I can teach you to turn a wrench. I can teach you to buy a stock, right? I can teach you skills. They need to use the skills. There's behaviors, right? Things you have to do on a regular basis. There's activities or behaviors, and then there's a mindset around it, right? What do you believe is true about yourself or other, right? So are we delivering to them, educating them in a way that what they start with is helpful, given, whatever we want to claim about the economic headwind that they're going to step into? And I don't think there is any argument that there's a great deal of headwind that they're stepping into, right? Mm. If you're taking a historical perspective. I am cautious about that. Even with that, there is still, historically speaking, a better life ahead of them than 70 years ago.
100%.
Right? So is it true life expectancy is lower today than it was 20 years ago? There's problems there for sure, right? We got to figure that out because we're eating garbage and processed foods, and we're not necessarily improving our health and health span, lifespan, blah, blah, blah. I think some of the economic advantage that we enjoy globally was created by overspending. Right. And so there's debt problems we have to figure out. There's currency problems. There's just regular, how do we operate ourselves as a country, political problems in terms of leadership and running a country, running a community, running a city. Like, how do we learn to work together and collaborate in a fashion where we have an opportunity to pursue what I do best, right? In economics, if I've got the raw material and the resources to be the best nail maker, then I can make the shit out of the nails and trade them with somebody else who's good at screws, right? And, on a global scale, everybody's better off if we get the opportunity to pursue in a very complicated global environment. I do think that that's true. Right? So yes, are we launching them potentially into a space where there's economic headwinds? For sure. Are we launching them with an abbreviated set of skills that maybe we're missing out? And some of this, I think, is a fair knock on the entitlement generation. Everybody got a ribbon, right? You got a participation ribbon. You got, well-meaning parents working very hard to remove obstacles, to make sure that nobody's feelings are ever hurt. Nobody experiences any downside, which again, I think builds some of the skills required. Not that we want to intentionally. Right. So this is where we start to get into some nuanced, beyond where I am. But to some degree, as you point out, entering into flow states to try to maximize your best opportunity to be productive in whatever skill area you find yourself blessed to pursue. I think, if you can find a path that sustains you in some real way, the skills gap, right? The difficulty gap, the engagement, the focus, the real material feedback, right? The immediate feedback. If you can find your way to something like that, could we de-energize some of the mansplaining of hard men, right? Hard men comes with some extra energy that I don't think is required. But I do think underlying that, the ability, how much of my job do I truly enjoy? How much of it is, stuff I have is a quote struggle, right? I'm a white collar worker sitting at a desk talking to a video machine. It's not a very difficult job. But if there's struggle or challenge or frustration, am I doing it in such a way, not that I'm hard or callous or over-egoed in an unhealthy fashion, but that I've leveraged tools to put that challenge in perspective such that maybe there's upside, right? And this is back to, I think, my identity. Is my identity tied to the outcome, which is outside my control, or the process, right? Is the failure an opportunity to learn, or is it a negative that suggests I'm bad, right?
Right. So one of the things I was talking about earlier today, and this is really kind of the core of what I want to ask you,
okay,
is I was talking about master keys, right? Like master key skills. And for me, it is emotional or nervous system regulation is like the master key skill. It unlocks all of the others.
For sure.
Right? Right. So we go back to the beginning of this conversation. The unexpected thing happens,
Yes.
The turmoil engages. I don't get to choose whether or not I'm going to have a nervous system response. I don't get to choose that, right?
I don't think so. I would agree with you.
But the ability to quickly, the ability, the skill set, the knowledge base to quickly go, I am not in a life-threatening situation. Things are happening that I don't want to happen. And I'm experiencing, my sympathetic nervous system is kicking off, right? Because of the stories that I'm telling
Yes.
about, this means this
Yes.
means more work. This
Yep.
means all the things that
Sadness,
that I didn't
anger,
want to happen.
blame, shame, frustration, all of
right?
the sticky hooks that get
Right?
triggered based on any energizing situation. Yes.
Sure. And the ability to go, this is not life-threatening. I am not in a life-threatening situation. And to be able to regulate that nervous system very quickly to go, okay, so what is happening, right? What is happening? And be able to then go, what are the next set of skills? So master key skill sets, which then unlock, okay, now communication, now resilience, now leadership, all of these things that we talked about.
Yes.
So when we look at the world of money, when we look at the world of finance, when we look at the world of preparedness, resilience in this way, what are some of the master key things that you can have, that you help clients put into place that, look, we don't get to see the thing coming. We don't know what it's going to be. I mean, I tell people all the time, look, the thing you're worried about is not the thing that's going to happen. Something way, way, way worse than that is going to happen.
Yes.
But if you spend all of your time worrying about this thing that's not going to happen, when the thing happens that you're worried about happens, you're responding to it from a depleted place. So don't worry about the thing. No, and it's exactly what you said. Know what you're going to do when the horrible thing happens so that you can just do that, right? And so referring to that as sort of like master key
Yes.
skill sets, what does that look like in a financial,
Yeah. So I would give back to you the master keys that you've mentioned so far, for sure. That, one of the things that I work on in myself is to strengthen at least the noticer, right? So before I can employ the strategies for master key number 2, which is, can I impact my sympathetic and parasympathetic system such that I can be in a different brain space shortly after the triggering event? I first have to notice, right? I have to strengthen the noticer that all of a sudden I'm galloping along at some level, and I have to be able to pause and go, all right, this is what this is, right? Now I apply my master key number 2, which is breath work or practice or whatever it is to at least slow down myself enough to then apply within this domain of financial health, whatever what you want to call this, wealth, wealth management, investment strategy. For me to have the wherewithal to apply the strategies that will be helpful at that point, I got to have 1 and 2. I got to notice that things are gone sideways and my thoughts are now crowding out, right, a healthy response. And I am not my thoughts, right? I can watch them go by. They're temporary, they're stories and judgments, but I first have to notice, right, that I'm caught up in that, such that I can apply some skills or training around slowing my heart rate, regulating my system so that the strategies I'm gonna employ can be employed and I can rationally look at them. So master key number 1, can I improve through meditation and awareness and getting distracted, noticing I'm distracted, bringing myself back, strengthening that skill, right, that I am not my thoughts. That in and of itself, I think, is a master key. Then when the triggering event comes up, do I have a set of skills that I've practiced such that breath work, box breathing, exhaling, warrior's breath, all of the techniques that we could apply at that point to take my heart rate from 120 to 100 at least, right? Then some of the monkey mind will additionally slow, right? Such that, oh, right, we talked about this. I don't know what the surprise was going to be, but I knew a surprise was coming.
Sure.
Right. And our strategy at this point is the following, right? And then to be curious and to carry these master keys into the next discussion, because you can certainly get tempted to believe, and the words that I try to teach my clients to be aware of and to listen is the excuses. And you talk about this in your training, right? Once things get hard, there will be language that comes up that is successful in getting you to stop, right? I don't want to get out of bed today because I'm sore, right? Whatever the excuses are, the language that we use, right? Once things get hard, and it always gets hard, right? In the wealth management space, there will be language like this, where you've practiced a set of skills, you're going to apply this in a case of emergency, and then your language is going to come up, right? That's going to try to convince you not to apply the hard thing.
What's that language going to sound like for some people?
This time, it's different. As the single most important phrase that I could teach somebody when the next crisis happens, and it's going to happen, right? When the next crisis happens, you will have hopefully a set of strategies that you're going to employ when the crisis happens, and somebody's going to come to you and try to claim those are strategies that were built for the last crisis and may not apply here because this time it's different.
This isn't like that. This isn't like the last 5 ones.
Yeah, and I'll give you a good example, right? So you own a storehouse of value. Let's imagine it's an ownership interest in a publicly traded company like Apple, right? And so you've earned money, you didn't spend it, you set it aside, and you purchased a storehouse of value like a share of Apple, and you had done it a lot, 20 years. And now you add up all of your shares of Apple and it's worth $1 million, right? And then in 2000, right, your ownership interest in Apple as a storehouse of value, if you've been doing it for 20 years, you're probably 60 now, right? Because you didn't have enough to earn and not spend unless you were 40, like your kids are a little older, you're making a little bit more. So now it's 20 years later, you're 60 and your $1 million just of storehouse of value. You went through a thoughtful process. You picked Apple. I don't recommend Apple. Do you consult your investment advisor? This is just a hypothetical example. But your value of Apple in March of 2020 wasn't $1 million. It was $600,000. Rough math, maybe $700,000. And the strategy that you were taught to employ at that time, if you loved Apple and you thought that they were wonderful, stocks, the value of stocks, it dropped during periods of instability and stress. And over the history of the stock market, it recovers. Good companies recover value over time. There are temporary periods where people voluntarily choose to give them away at a discount to get rid of them. If you love it, your strategy should be to go buy more. That should be your strategy, right? If you love this company at $1 million and it's now trading at $600,000, you know what you wish you had? Cash to go buy more. And you know what you don't want to do? Go buy more. Because somewhere in the conversation, you heard somebody say, this time it's different. This time it's different. John, I understand that we set up our portfolio such that we had resources set aside that didn't go down when the resources we set aside for growth do go down. So I have something to sell to go buy the stuff that just went down, right? I've set up a process so that I can take advantage of the surprises that come up in the marketplace. But John, people are dying. There are realistic projections that of the, how many US, 300 million Americans, half of them will be dead by the end of the year. It's 150 million. We're all going to die of, dead body decay diseases a year after that, right? It's over. This time, it's different. Okay. Very hard to logic into that, right? That is a galloping brain, right? Attached to an emotional story, right? That is very hard to unseat, right? Because again, if I describe, Dave, I appreciate that. And I'm as scared as you are. I have kids. I don't want to die. I really like being alive. I'm not sure I'm going to get another crack at this. Like, I'd like to think that I've done a good job. I'm going to be elevated. And I'm going to come back as my son, because he's awesome. So this may be it for me. And I don't know what this disease is going to play out. There was no way to know in March of 2020 that the stock market drop wouldn't continue, right? There was 30 to 40% drop, and the value of high quality assets dropped very quickly. And it was not clear that that was over. And it was very easy to look at this crisis and say, you know what, Dave, you're right. This time it's different. We don't know what the future is going to hold. Seems very scary. What if all of us die, right? Well, then let's play it out. If everybody dies, did it matter what you held or whether you went to cash or not? We're all dead. We are all dead. And it didn't matter. If your identity is tied to the outcome of your wealth and not the process for creating it, and the joy and the ability, the flow states, if your identity is tied to the wins and not the lessons that you learned along the way to play the sport with your team, then that change in value is very emotionally sticky and hard to unseat. But if you have some master keys, the language you use, right, to notice my mind is galloping, right? And potentially tied to emotional stories around this outcome. And it is true that by and large, good assets recover over some period of time. And if we've set ourselves up correctly for surprises that we know are coming, we don't know what the nature is, and we don't know, we can look at past surprises and see some of the nature and the characteristic, but the next surprise will not be the last surprise, so we can't prepare in the same way, but we at least have to confront that a surprise is coming. And based on the nature of the surprises, if we own enough different things, one of them's going to hit the skids. Could we take the other things and sell them to go buy some more of that? And does that play out and give us an opportunity to at least lean in? So here's a cascade as I explain it to my clients. At a minimum, when the surprise comes, do nothing. Through every big surprise, when the words came out, this time it's different. If at least you did nothing, you were okay. 2 years later, 3 years later, 4 years later. But wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be lovely? Couldn't we change the nature of how this might feel if we could profit from this period of instability we know is coming? We don't know what the source is, but in general, if this is the one that kills us, it won't matter anyway, but it's probably not going to kill us. So could we profit from that by putting ourselves in the position to take advantage of that mispricing when it happens, to come out on the other side even stronger? Does that give me a new story around this identity of wealth to do better than your neighbors in a fashion that triggers this process? But we got to notice, regulate, and apply the decision-making process to put it to work. And this time it's different is one of those languages. I don't believe you. You have a vested interest in me not selling, right? John, you don't sell cryptocurrency, so you're not telling me about it because you can't. I mean, there's all sorts of things that you could wage at me. Right. From this place. And, yes.
So in this example, and I love this because we've talked about pieces of this before in different contexts. And it's funny, I teach like 5 things, right? like what I teach is not this like vast awareness. It is a couple of very simple awarenesses. And so when the stuff hits the fan, regardless of whatever it is, my response is always just fucking breathe, right? Bring the thing down, because whatever it is, if you panic, it's over, right? If you panic. And so if you do nothing, so right, in any high stress situation, yep. high consequence, high stress, and it even doesn't even need to be high consequence. for it to feel high consequence.
No, I
right?
understand. No, I understand.
Yeah,
It's high
that's one of
consequence to you.
Right. That's one of the big problems when people get wrapped around the axle. My nervous system shoots through the roof because it feels high consequence.
It doesn't know the difference.
Yeah, the nervous system doesn't know the difference, right? And so being able to breathe, to bring my nervous system down, because when the stuff hits the fan, the calmest person in the room is automatically the leader. That is me then being able to leverage this master key of of nervous system regulation into leadership. I've now taken a situation, and when everybody else panics, I have a skill set, I have a tool that enables me to leverage that resilience into leadership. And I can go, all right, now let's go. So in the financial, so when everybody else says this time it's different, right? And the thing that I can leverage, and what you said was, so that I can take something and now leverage it into something else. So is that financial master key? Is it a stack of, I understand it being liquidity, right? Liquidity, because liquidity is the thing that allows you to involve yourself in the process, not the outcome, right? If I have liquidity, I can immediately engage in the money generating process.
Yeah, there's depending on where the individual is in their wealth management process, we generally teach, I encourage people to explore and get to understand the stories around 2 or 3 tools. The first one, the triggering event for many individuals, especially as they get close to that date when the resources they accumulated grew so large that their requirement to work for sustenance has become voluntary. As they get close to that number, now all of a sudden the concern is that they're going to be pushed so far back that it's going to have a huge impact on their ability to, or they'll be wiped out. They have legacy stories of my neighbor, my brother-in-law, my cousin, right, was wiped out in the XYZ crash, dot-com crash, 2007, 8, 9 crash. So some of those stories you got to deal with and uncover, what do you mean by wiped out? I want to make sure we understand, because you can get wiped out by putting all of your resources in a company. It is very, very challenging to wipe somebody out by putting it in 1,000, right? So you got to understand the story, but in general, teaching a couple of different things. So most of the time, the insulation that you need from the change in value of a storehouse of value is to make sure that you don't have a misalignment in time goals. And the way you tend to get at that for somebody who's in the stage of getting close to spending their resources is to break the resources down into buckets of money. Whatever I need to spend in the next 6 months is in my checking and savings account. And as much as we worry about the fact that banks are going to go away, it is very, 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 very unlikely that banks realistically go away, right? You can chase FDIC insurance and there's tools to make sure that you're protected. But by and large, for most of us, 3 to 6 months of our living expenses in a checking and savings, high yield savings, but in an FDIC insured, financial institution is sufficient. The next 5 years of stuff that you need, it would be great if we could get a little bit more income than what's offered by a checking and savings account, but we don't really want to risk it. We want to be able to, over 5 years, that if the rest of our stuff does pull a digger, because we don't know when it's going to happen, it's going to happen. We don't know when it's going to happen. We don't know the source of what it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. So if you had $1 million in 2007, and you were planning to pull 40 grand a year from that portfolio for the rest of your life, let's take $200,000 and put it in stuff that is downside resilient, right? There are financial instruments, generally speaking, in portfolio construction today. We often use bonds. This is the debt of companies and institutions. It tended to be very resilient during the 07, 08 stock market drop. So if you had $200,000 in a diversified portfolio of bonds, in general, your $200,000, despite the fact that your stock side went down 50%, cut in half, your bond stuff changed 0, okay? So let's go back to our portfolio. $1 million, we take 200 grand, we park it in bonds, we have $800,000. Your $800,000 went from 800 to 4. Right? Now, all of a sudden, you have $600,000 total from a pre-2007 total of $1 million. Yes, that sucks. The technical investing term for that result is sucks. However, I can fill your checking account and cover your $40,000 a year spending for 5 years. Does that buy us a breath to wait for the stock side to recover? Does it? Does that give you the story, the longest stock market correction from a time frame standpoint that we have on record, and we're going to be surprised if somebody else is going to win this record, is 5 years, right? That was 07, 08, 09, 10, 11, 12, rough math. So if you did nothing and you just lived on your bonds and you waited for it to recover, your stock side dropped from 800 to 400 and was back to 800 by the time 2012 came around. Right? You were okay. It worked. Buckets of money can give you a story. We built your, I know you're sad and angry and frustrated and ashamed and there's a swirl of emotions. Something surprising has happened.
Right. My nervous system just spiked.
Do you remember this conversation that we had about building your portfolio such that we were going to take 5 years of what you needed and park it in this stuff that's not moving much at all? Here it is. Let's pull up your account. Let's look at it. Let's talk about it, right? Staring you, does that give you, a story to loosen that to some degree? So buckets of money, right, to set yourself up. Tool number one.
So that's the breath, right? That's the breath that I train.
Can it give you a story, right, that has emotional content such that we could get even? Does that at least get you to do nothing?
So if I can catch this breath, if I have access to 5 years.
Remember, we had a strategy. You're not going to hear me if we don't notice and at least do initial breath to slow down to hear me. You won't even hear me if we don't do master key 1 and 2. But once we get to master key 1 and 2, you've slowed down enough to hear me. Remember, when we did your plan, we worked through this process, we were building your portfolio. Yes, we could have been more aggressive and earned a better return, but let's build it to be a little bit more conservative so that when the craziness happens, and it's going to happen, I can't tell you when it's going to happen. I can't really prepare for it because the last one won't be the same as the next one. But if we structure it in this way, rather than 8%, you get 7%, but because we got 7%, we have 5 years of what you need parked in bonds, right? Remember we talked about that? Yes, I remember you beat it over me with a stick and now, okay, fine. Remember, this is the moment that was built for. You made such a beautiful decision when you hired a professional to go through this process and build a portfolio, and you were willing to step back a little bit from a total return standpoint to have this resource ready for you for this moment. Can we pause there? Right now, so you first had to stop being angry long enough to hear what you decided to do. When things were going well, in case of emergency, this is what we did. We put a fire extinguisher on the wall. It's right there. Do you see it? Yes, I see it. Now, the fire isn't here. It's next door, so we got to be ready, but it's right there. Do you see it? Yes, I see it. Okay, fine. Now, can we get you even excited? I know it's hard. There's bad things going on, but could we, skill number 2, strategy number 2, on the rest of your stuff? You had $1 million. We took 200 grand. We really worked hard to insulate it from as many surprises as we could, as best we can. The world changes. Some of these strategies are going to change. Some people are going to disagree. You need to find your own tool that is resilient to enough surprises as you can, such that you can put yourself in this position from an emotional regulation, a physical, parasympathetic, sympathetic regulation standpoint. Then could you, with the rest, this 800 grand, could you have bought enough different things such that maybe some things either went up when everything else went down, or at least went down less than everything else, so that you had something to sell to take advantage of the fact that everybody's panicked. Nobody wants their stuff. They're paying you to buy it from you. And the one thing that gets people to chuckle, they think somehow these resources are different. But if you were a real estate investor, you were buying rental properties in 05, 06, 07, and you loved real estate and you believe in it today, you know what you wanted in 09? You wanted cash, because they were all free. Every rental property that you ever wanted to buy was on sale at 70% off. And you know what every real estate investor in 09 didn't have? It was cash. They didn't have something different than their favorite thing, right? They kept piling it into the one thing that they believed in above all others. They didn't have different things that behaved differently. So the skill number 2 is, could we find things that, given the panoply of surprises that could come, some of these different things might behave differently in that next period of stress? So the example here in 2025 is stuff outside the US. So companies run outside the US, we can invest in and use them as a storehouse of value. And over the last 10 years, they sucked as a total return compared to stuff you could have owned inside the US. But we still recommend owning them because there are periods of time, according to literature, data, science, and understanding how these processes work, there will be a period of time when they're going to do better and we're going to do worse. And then we're going to use it. Then we're going to take advantage. We're going to, stuff outside the US goes up, stuff inside the US goes down. We're going to say thank you. We're going to take some of that. We're going to buy some of the stuff in the US because it's going to revert. Right? And we're going to play them against each other. Right? And we're going to be able to take advantage and buy high quality, attractive stuff on sale. So skill number 2, can you diversify and rebalance or take advantage by buying different things that behave differently? Like a lot of people come to us and they look at what's the best performing thing over the last 10 years, and that's all they buy. And they buy 8 different things that all basically own the same stuff. You break them apart and it's Apple, Netflix, Facebook, Google, Nvidia, Amazon. It's really concentrated in a narrow, it feels like I'm diversified, but you're not, right? It's all the same stuff.
Right. It's 5 things that all own the same 5 things.
Correct. Right. And they want the best performing portfolio, and there is no opportunity in that portfolio to take advantage, which is fine. You don't have to buy things that are different, but you got to confront the fact that that one tool now is no longer available to you during that period of instability, right? That during that period of instability, you don't have something that behaves. You're back to my real estate investor example, right? Your only tool then is to wait. And if you have the 200 grand set aside so that you have the resources to wait, then it'll be fine. But you don't have the opportunity to turn it to your favor and take advantage. Boy, I'm going to buy some boring stuff that only grows at 6%, in addition to the exciting stuff that looks like it grew at 10%. You know, why would I buy any of that boring stuff for now?
Well, it also speaks to, because I understand I'm invested in, I take enjoyment in the process.
Yes.
Not the outcome.
Be curious.
Right? I understand the process, and part of the process is having different stuff, right? Part of the process, like, it's not about that $1 million. It's about how I got there, and about if it dropped by 3/4, how I would use the remaining amount to get back there, right? Because I am in love with the process of wealth building. I am in love with the process, not the outcome. The outcome is the outcome is the outcome. Outcomes can change based on time, whatever. But I am in love with the fact that no matter what happens, I have been trained, and I have a guy in my pocket. I have John O'Dea in my pocket who is very familiar with the strategies of, okay, this whole system has gone to hell. So now what do? Oh, here's John going, oh yeah, we're not worried about that at all. We're going to focus on this for a while. Right. So, you know, my marriage, the thing that has always given me stability and confidence, whatever, has gone to hell. I now go to Dave and go, my life is falling apart in front of me, right? My kids hate me. My wife is leaving. I will be pushing a shopping cart, talking to myself inside 6 months, right? What do I do? Okay. Remember when we said, just breathe, right?
Pause for a second, right?
Pause for a second.
I hear you, right? I'm with you. And if we got to sell everything and send it to you so that we can buy the best shopping cart ever, I will place the trade button and send you that cash. And you got to give me a chance to go back to the conversations that you might remember having, that we talked about preparing for this moment, preparing for this opportunity.
And this is the building of resilience, right? The building of resilience, the planning for the thing that I don't know is going to happen. And when I am not afraid of the thing that I don't know is going to happen, there's something very powerful there.
Yes. And we talked about, could you even shift from fragile to resilient to anti-fragile?
To anti-fragile, right. And I think that's where the anti-fragility, I think, is that master key. Like, that I have pieces in place that make me anti-fragile.
Yeah. I mean, I heard a speaker talk about the admiration that the speaker had for the masters of their craft, willing to push themselves in very public fashion at the outside edge of their capability such that they failed on a regular basis. And when you do that in many domains, the personal suffering around that failure is just too much. Most of us can't, right? They were describing it in a sports context. Like if my livelihood, my identity is based on whether the coach considers me a starter or not, am I really going to push myself to the outside edge where I'm failing in practice? No, right? And that's where the beauty and the mastery and the decoupling from the outcome really starts to change from resilient, right? I'm not taken sideways by the failure to, man, the things I learned. Right? The things that I learned such that when they sack me relentlessly, right? Is there a way to giggle and laugh and use it against them, right? Is there an opportunity there to not just be resilient to, man, I'm going to lose, right? And like my contract doesn't allow for losing, right? I'm going to get traded. I'm going to get fired, right? My identity is now tied to that. Same is true from wealth that you brought up, right? If I'm the primary decision maker around the financial information in my coupling, right? If I'm teamed up with somebody and, we've officially described that as a spousal relationship, and I'm the one that's, to split things up, my partner's doing dishes and socks and I'm doing 401k allocations and investment decisions, and I fuck this up, do I end up, divorced, right? And shamed, right? That the failure is such that I can't recover. And that's very hard to decouple from. And the most powerful way to get not just from fragile to resilient, but from resilient to anti-fragile, right? Can you get you and your team to the point where it won't matter? Whatever the number is on the page at the end of 10 years, it won't matter. The most beautiful processes that we experience, some of them are definitely enhanced over a certain threshold with additional resources, but there's a diminishing return on that.
Sure. And let's be clear. Like, it is better to have resources than to not have resources.
For sure.
Right. Physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, whatever. It is better to be resourced than to not be resourced.
You will have more options for sure, right? If you're in a wheelchair, you got a limited set of choices in terms of sports to experience, right? So, there are definitely some physical capabilities that change the nature of what you get to experience, as in any, right? Emotional, spiritual, relational, right? That's, I don't know how to get to that one from a fixed perspective, but is it true within the context of the resources that you've been blessed with that your flow is not from the outcome, but from the people and the meaning and the experience that you have in this domain that you want to improve from a mastery standpoint? I think there's real opportunity there.
Well, and even the beginning back is a life in a wheelchair a diminished life, or is that simply a different one? Right? Is it a somehow diminished experience, or is it just the one that you have? Right? And I had this conversation with my wife this morning, standing on our porch, when she goes, why does the world seem a little more agitated today? What's going on? I'm like, the world does seem a little more agitated today, particularly for people living in the United States right now, because we are living through a really challenging part of our history. And one of the things that makes it challenging is every privilege we have ever enjoyed for the last 3 generations are beginning to come into question. Right. And the things that have enabled me to build businesses and to have lives and to travel and to have my currency be the number one currency in the world, to have my passport be a very, very powerful passport. These things are now in question and these things are now changing. The ability of the things that I have always used to leverage, and I didn't do anything. I was simply born into this place in this time. I didn't do anything special. They gave me these things, and we can extrapolate all the way out to gender, to race, to the.
Yeah, the losses that I'm experiencing are not my fault.
Right.
I
Right.
did not intend or make decisions in such a fashion where I'm incurring these losses.
Right.
That's unfair.
And we are now watching, right, a world, at least regionally, our world going, what is this? And we're seeing, right, the watcher, right? We are seeing, I don't know what's going to happen, but something's going to happen. And it is, my future comfortability is definitely feeling imperiled. And I think just that general sense of that creates a stress. So as you are, I am sure, encouraging people to make sure that there is some liquidity, right? That there are some resources available to them. I am spending a lot of time going, are you currently in danger? And do you know how to regulate quickly? Do you know how to identify the fact that you are not in actual physical danger in this moment, to ground into the safety of this moment and go, and with breath, I can ground into the safety of this moment. With cash, somebody can ground into the safety of, I can engage in commerce. I can engage in the processes that build wealth, that create cash flow, right? Because I have the ability to breathe. I have the ability to move resources. I have resources to move, which provides that space that I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm pretty sure, catastrophe notwithstanding, I will be fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think the feeling, right, map it to any one of the sense of impending doom time periods that we've experienced. And I don't mean to minimize, and I am with you in the scary nature of the information that is coming to us. And it is very tempting to layer on to this moment, my process should change and I should have new strategies because this time it's different.
It's learning how to fight in a fight.
Right? And, so the temptation is exactly what you described. Do I change my strategy because it feels like we're right on the edge of something meaningful from an economic standpoint that I'd rather avoid, right? Do I, on my fill in the blank, if I have $5,000, do I take all 5,000 of it out of risk-based assets and put it in cash? Do I take my $1 million that I was ready to spend next year in retirement and take it out and put it in cash, right? That sense of safety. How big of that sense of safety do I need can be its own masquerading problem.
Sure.
Right? That own story of, avoiding the triggering event and the identity, right? What are you learning about yourself? We talked about building a strategy for moments like this, right? Enough different things such that when the nature of the surprise comes, and it's always going to come, and when it comes, it's going to feel like, you know what? This time it's different, right? This time it's different. And so can you do nothing and go back to learning what is coming up for you based on this moment? What is this moment teaching you? What is the failures what is the energy? What is the feedback that you're getting teaching you?
What is the story I am telling myself about this moment?
Yes.
What is the story I am
Yes.
telling myself?
What am I not
about-
learning? What am I not learning? What am I locking down and eliminating curiosity around? What is my own role in this process that has taken this in a direction? And you may go through this exploration and decide, no, the reason that the other is an enemy is because they're really an enemy. I can't define that for you. And you may find that if you can loosen the hold, that some of this is not as catastrophic as it might feel, right? That there may be more energy to it than is really present from an informational standpoint. And that's the danger, right? The crisis, right? Danger and opportunity, or, I don't think that's actually what the characters mean, but that combination of in a crisis where there's danger and opportunity coming together, danger outsized portion triggers that response. We notice, yep, I'm pretty energized. I'm going to breathe a couple of times so I can sell and go to cash. I'm not sure is the right conclusion. And without the first two master keys, you never get to the strategy that you laid out for emergencies like this, for periods of instability. It is true, as far as I can tell, that there are strategies that you can employ during periods of instability, surprise, anger, frustration, what appears to be economic destruction at a global scale, that it's better to just hide, sell and go to cash and feel better than to stick to your process.
Well, right. And that's what I was talking about. You don't want to learn how to fight in a fight.
Yes.
You don't change your strategy on game day. Right? This is the moment that we set this entire strategy up for. You don't abandon that strategy because it feels different. No, we knew it was going to feel different. No, we're going to breathe and we're going to do the thing that we planned to do.
And it may be, I don't know where the arc of the stories go through, but let's imagine I'm scared, angry, frustrated, right? And I didn't have a strategy ahead of time, right? And I'm now trying to learn to fight in the middle of a fight. Okay. Maybe I have some rudimentary master keys, such as I've noticed that I noticed I'm energized, right? And I'm willing to breathe, to slow my heart rate down such that I may be able to get information, apply a strategy in the middle of a fight. Okay. It may be that in this discussion that if somebody goes through this process, you might decide that the time frame is so long, born in 1972, so it's 2025, so what am I, 53 currently? 53 years old. Despite potential catastrophic changes, I have a 40-year horizon, right? So if you, like me, find yourself learning to fight in the middle of a fight, it may be true that for some period of time, it's going to be difficult to find good information, good systems in the middle of a fight. Like, are you taking feedback from the crowd? Throw the haymaker! You're seeking feedback about how to fight from the crowd, right? Which is where most people find themselves, right? They're searching, right? They're seeking, and how do they quickly apply a system or a process over a 40-year horizon? If you sell and go to cash to figure it out and build your process, 40 years doing it once won't matter. As long as you do get to a strategy and a process that you don't do it every time it gets scary.
Right.
Right. That doing it every time it gets scary is a quick way to turn a big pile into a small pile. Research will suggest that trying to time and avoid, these sorts of surprises is very, very challenging, to the point that very likely you're going to take a big pile and turn it into a small pile. And so if you do it once, to pause and say, I don't have a strategy, I'm learning to fight in the middle of a fight, I will run away. Now I've learned, I don't know how to fight. I just uncovered, I learned, and without shame, blame, process, that just provided me information that I probably should build some rudimentary skills to be safe in a situation like this. How do I seek out and find sources of information, people to coach and support me who have my best interest, who are, who really want to see me succeed in a real and material way, and are willing to teach me some of the techniques that I can apply next time it happens, and mentor and coach and expand my perspective such that I'm ready next time, where I'm not selling and coaching. So you could imagine that there's a story like that for somebody who is unprepared, right? They have master key 1 and 2, but they don't have in this domain in their life a strategy. At minimum, try not to do anything. See if you can just stick to the strategy that you may have already. But each situation is unique and different. Right? Each fight is unique and different. Each crisis is unique and different. Each person's, how do you reposition from wealth as an outcome-oriented goal to a process outcome-oriented goal? That's going to be different for each set of contexts, right? When you build a house, each lot is different, right? Each constraint is different. What you're licensed, the, square footage, what is bedrock versus sand? Like, you got to pivot and apply and uniquely. But in the process of building a house, right, in the process of pursuing a goal, we keep using the word process.
Right. There is a
series of steps.
There's a series of steps, and they're not quite rinse and repeat. Right. Every system is different. But if you're in love with building houses,
yes,
right? And you built a beautiful house and somebody comes by and knocks down your house. You go, well, that's fine. I not not the outcome I wanted.
Right. I'm going to collect
However,
some insurance money.
right, that is not what I wanted. However, because I know how to build a house and because I actually don't hate building houses,
Yeah.
right? A knocked down house is not the worst possible thing that ever happened to me. I like building houses and
Yeah.
I know how to do it,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, if we can, so this is where my own limitations start to end, right? And easier to say than do, right? I live in a big, huge glass house with stones in my hand. I'm going to throw it at others and I'm ready to take the criticisms myself. But to find the magic in the process of the value that you create, such that whatever outcomes that you've built are taken from you, right? Learn from that. But it is in the process that is the real estate planning gift to transfer to yourself and others, right? To model for yourself and others, to be present in those situations. If you can produce value for yourself and others in such a fashion that you used to be able to have excess and now you don't, you're probably not that far from getting back to that.
Right.
Right. And, if you can get to that state as fast as possible, that it's not the thing, it's not the car or the house or the clothes or the stupid glasses or whatever it is that I've done that drove me in the past, right? If I can get to the point where I can trigger flow states around the delight that is created in the success of others, right? If that becomes more and more the flywheel of my process, right? That gives me energy and allows me to repeat and to get more done than others, then, should I experience a huge setback in some capacity, and in my process, they're coming, right? Machines are coming for my job. No joke, right? The machines are coming for my job and they're coming soon, right? And technology eliminates real parts of the process of delivering financial advice for the last 100 years. The ability to build a stock and to buy a stock, like went from buying things from hard to now easier, right? The ability to place a trade, you used to have to call somebody on the phone and fax them something, right? And then they charged you per phone call. Like that. Those days are over, right? The process of trying to figure out what's good stuff to buy, that's really getting solved to some degree. And so who am I? What's my role? If I was financial advisor placing trades and that was my identity and I was placing trades better than anybody else and my job was to find things better than anybody else, like my identity is over 3 years ago and I just don't know it yet. My identity, my role has to expand to something that is sustainable and decoupled to some degree. And it's fucking hard. It's fucking hard. I don't have a clean answer for it, but I know it's in there.
Right. Yeah. And that is, therein lies the joy of sort of living, right? The joy of, I am not a guy who deals with, I'm a former chef. I am not a guy who deals with like slow and steady and smooth gracefully at all. You put me in the middle of a crisis. You set the fryer on fire, right? And
Yes.
The fryer is on fire. I have 2 cooks out, a full dining room, and some celebrity who doesn't have a reservation and absolutely insists that there's a table of 8 for them
Right.
in the middle of my rush.
Right.
Are they going to burn us to the ground in the court of public opinion? Here's where like I come alive. Here's where it's. And I don't like, because out comes that's the close of the loop. And as much as I like closed loops, I like being in the process. Like, let's go. I love chaos. Boy does my wife not enjoy that, right?
Different skills, right?
Right?
Different beauty, different creation, passion, skill set, orientations around what is helpful, right? And what provides value. So master keys during periods of instability, nothing gets applied, right? Nothing gets applied without the ability to try to decouple, right? The emotional reaction, the sympathetic reaction to the threat, If the data is a threat, and without the ability to do that, you will find yourself in a downward spiral chasing the emotional triggers of the threat, right? Through whatever quote unquote informational community tribe that you follow. Not that, information tribes are not important, and they can be designed to trigger reactions rather than deliver insight or wisdom. And so, without a strategy or a knowledge or a pause, you'll never get to whatever you learned to apply. And if you find yourself without any tools to apply, that's a different set of problems. Try to learn them, right, as best you can. But to get there, you got to notice so that you can apply your regulation, right, the breathing to reset, so that you can see, right, to some degree with some clarity.
Right. And whatever your sort of information community is, right? Like they're all built that, everybody comes by them fairly, right? But every single one of them has their own bias. Maybe we should bring our mutual friend Matthew Cahill in here and talk about the implicit biases of any information community, any information source, any information tribe, because they all have like their particular like thing that they aspire to want to help the members of this thing kind of move towards. So they all have these sort of implicit biases, and I don't think any of them really are deliberately malevolent. I think some of the biases can be more or less grounded in objective reality, but
Yeah, I mean, I think I think you're right. I think as I try to be present for people of every tribe, right, the process for building, creating, matching, and making sound decisions around wealth is tribe independent by and large.
Sure, as is the nervous system, right?
And
just fucking breathe.
In most communities, most folks, as you use the term, which I think is why they came by their perspective fairly, driven by the idea that nobody really imagines that they're the villain, right? That everybody's come into this process thinking that they've thoughtfully investigated the data and the knowledge and wisdom that was present and came to solid conclusions around, in order of priority, trade-offs that are worth making. Resource trade-offs, prioritizing decision-making based on the willingness to and what is valued and the perspective of what is valued. And, this is where it can be interesting to neighbors will trade sugar and yell at each other on next door, right? The difference between I see you suffering and I want to fix that, to there's others that make me nervous, and the breakdowns there, but the the weaponization of motivated communities to move populations to action, I think is what starts to pervert this, right? The science and data and tools advance to the degree where we really are not aware of how we're being triggered and directed to some degree. And so it's hard to see where somebody that we think is really making an unsound decision is not evil, right? Is not fundamentally flawed in an intrinsic fashion, right? And it's not circumstance, it's intrinsic flaw, right? Somebody cuts you off and it's not because they're late and their kid is sick and they're trying to get to the hospital. It's because they're evil inside.
Right.
And so I think it's, especially in monocultural communities, right, that really share a lot of the same ideals, you can get a lot of this groupthink together, exacerbated by the community-based information sources, community-approved code words and in-jokes and heroes and
collective truths and beliefs.
Yeah, and you really get to this point where it can be hard to get people to hear what's important. And no different than global communities, even before the information age of the hyper-focused ability to curate your screen with information that got you to watch longer, right? Even before that, this is millennia. right? Of people nervous about the other and how little it matters. How little it matters. Can I support the pursuit of flow in another in a fashion as long as it preserves some amount of fairness-based community support where it doesn't overly negatively affect my own pursuit of flow? It's hard. It's more and more disheartening, right, to try to find common communal language around right, wrong, prioritization, resource trade-offs, and the challenges that are coming are not immaterial.
Right. And this is where I will say, like, this is where that the ability to either stay or return to that nervous system regulation when you get cut off, right? To be able to I know they almost ran you off the road. I get it. And
Yes.
I don't know what their story is. I don't know if there's a child that's throwing up with 105-degree temperature in the backseat of that car. Like, I don't know. I don't know if there's a woman who is inches from giving birth.
Even to the nth degree. Like, let's say that it is the worst possible human that you can imagine, trapped in a identity and a story and a process, poisoned by the process, where they really are what you imagine, right? An entitled person trying to profit by your loss, right? At the expense of others and the community, right? They're driving erratically such that they're going to cost somebody their life, right? It really can't be true that the advantage that they're seeking is worth the loss of somebody's life. Driving erratically, cutting somebody off, operating at an unsafe speed, whatever it is. Let's say that is true. Is there a place of grace that you could get to? I'm not sure I can, where you are sympathetic for whatever context was created that put that person in that state.
I would say yes, and it doesn't matter. What I can do is regulate my nervous system such that I don't need to respond to that behavior. Right. So I'm now
at least resilient, right? I've gone from fragile, right? I want to, like LA story, Steve Martin, I'm going to pull my handgun out of the glove box. Hey, do bullets go bad? Everybody's shooting on the LA freeways, right?
Right.
I've gone from fragile, where I want somebody to die because they've cut me off, to at least decoupled, right? From that person's behavior is not mine, right? My regulation is not dependent on their behavior.
Right. And now that they're in front of me and I can see them, okay, I can regulate my nervous system and I can alter my behavior so that I am not engaged with them. That's now resilient. Like, okay, I can, and I would say the anti-fragile approach, right, with all master keys in place, is leaving the house understanding that guy's out there. Right. Understanding that I'm not going to see them coming. So, and like, this guy's whipping around doing weird stuff. I know I'm not going to see them coming. And so the moment I get, the flash of taillights, right, and feel that surge.
And it's tough.
Right. Like, it's not about
my retirement job. I'll find something else to do. But what I'd love to do is ride a motorcycle in split lanes and follow those people until they pull over and do something to them. Pee in their gas tank or,
put gum in their hair.
Yeah. I mean, the HOV lane driver who pulls out before they're charged the $1 or whatever it is and then pull back in, the person cutting off and speeding up on the left, right? The one that's merging in at the last minute, all the different problems that we see exhibited on the roadways. There's some, lane cheater sticker I'm going to put on their windshield, right? And that's going to be my I'm going to be the Justice League of the freeways, because there's not enough. I'm going to volunteer my time to follow them around on a motorcycle. When they stop and they go wherever they're going to go, I'm going to inflict fairness damage on them and get them.
Right.
And it's a really good story that I wish I didn't like so much.
Right. Yeah. The only problem is what that means is I get to spend the rest of my life just like mad about what you did.
All the time.
Mad about what you did. There's the guy.
Is it funny? How much pee do I have to put in their gas tank? And they just cut me off once. Is that a little p? And
Yeah, and this is the deal, right? This is the deal. Like I want to spend my time not angry, not worried, right? Not afraid that somebody's gonna run me off the road. That like that idea that no matter, because I love driving, whatever happens, I'll be able to handle. Because I'm confident in my ability to drive, I am certain that absent catastrophe, right? Some days you're just the guy that gets barreled into, right? You didn't see it coming. There was nothing you could have done to stop it.
turkey strike.
Right. There was no amount of awareness that would have prevented that,
I
right?
can't breathe my way through a chunk of airline poop ice hitting my windshield and killing me.
Right. There's no amount of awareness, and not living my life in fear of that, right? Not wrapping myself, so going out into the world and exploring everything that life has to offer, because I will not live in fear, and I will not live at the effect of everybody else around me, including global economy, right? I can put enough things in place, and I can have enough master keys that whatever happens, I am absolutely certain, absent catastrophe that is going to take us all, the tsunami, the comet, that whatever, right? The global pandemic that killed me. Like I can, if I'm breathing, I can weather this.
Yeah. I mean, I think, back to, we could go on forever, but the bromosphere, right? The manscaping, could you get to the point where you can embrace difficulty, eagerly embrace challenge without the extra baggage that seems to come from hard men, hard humans, hard people produce good things in such a fashion where when things get hard, can you reframe that in an expansive fashion that doesn't have this negative extra?
Right. It becomes opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, there is, strength in experiencing the adversity. Can I experience the adversity without and come out willing to embrace it without the negatives that often are required to survive the adversity? Right? Is there a space in the Goggins mindset that gets him through 3 Navy SEAL trials such that he ultimately passes with all of his adversity, right? Mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The internal dialogue and self-talk required to experience that level of adversity at the very highest levels of that game, right? The BUDS process. Is there a path through that without potentially negative ancillary effects or mindset or story? And I think, I think that, using tools like breathwork and regulation and process, flow, repurposing around process rather than result, could that get you there? That's my hope.
Yeah. Well, the question is, I mean, you got to take on damage, right? And not being fearful of damage, right? There's no life lived without trauma. Birth is a traumatic process, right? And so the answer is yeah, but do you get to come through it? Is damage bad? Is our wounds necessarily a terrible thing, right? Everybody gets them. We all, has anyone who hasn't experienced catastrophic loss anti-fragile?
I mean, I think we've talked about this, right? There is a nature, or there is a impression often given off by folks who have experienced real setback, right? Real challenge, and learned a set of tools that seems to set them apart, right? You find them in a bunch of different contexts where their patina is different. You gotta do something long enough to have really screwed it up for me to believe you.
Right. And there's the resilience, right? That I've gone through loss and failure, and yet here I am still doing the same thing, right? Because the loss and failure was not the end. It was a part of the process. And the loss of the outcome that I had in mind did not mean that this thing was a failure.
What did you learn?
It's about being in love with the process and not being in love with the outcome. What did you learn?
There's definitely some failures that won't produce supportive communities on the other side, depending on how you dealt with the failure. I've spent a little time with somebody who coaches tech CEOs, and it's a little bit like the first time you're probably not going to be good at it until your seventh company. You really don't know what you're doing, right? Because, all of the failures that you experience in those first six really prepare you for the seventh, right? Where you got a shot. Those failures, right, set you up for that process.
They're formative. They're valuable. Stop fearing
Can
them.
you
Stop
survive?
trying to not have them.
Yeah.
No, failure is, and catastrophic loss and all these things. It'll be different this time. No, just weather it.
All right, let me ask
tools
you
to weather it.
before we run out of time. There was a Lessons from Stoicism book or article that I read that one of the tips or techniques they suggested was to meditate on the loss of things and people important to you. Do you go that far where you physically imagine and go through do you use that as a tool or a technique to meditate on the loss of my wife or my child, such that I come out on the other side more grateful and present because they are alive? Do you get that far from a strategy standpoint?
100%. Thich Nhat Hanh has this amazing process where you hug somebody, right? You hug your dog, or you hug your kid, or you hug your partner, or you hug your best friend, and you embrace them. And then in that moment, you imagine that you're holding their dead body, right? That you're embracing them. They're gone. They're dead. This is it, right? And they're gone. There's nothing coming back. And
so
then
let's apply Thich Nhat Hanh. I can't pronounce his name. I know who you're talking about. So how would you apply that? Is there an application of this strategy, right, to uncover the stories, right, to get present with what's true and important? Your stuff is gone.
Right. I lost everything. What is important?
What is now true?
About me?
What is now true? Are you really different? Are you impaired? Are you less than?
Right. Are you worse? Are you worse?
Are you worthless?
Less? Yeah.
Everything that you have worked towards, blood, sweat, tears, missed kids stuff, damaged relationships to the degree that may not be recoverable or already gone, right? And all of the financial rewards that you have accumulated as a result are taken from you. Now what is true, right?
Right. And was it futile? Is everything you did now meaningless? Yeah. And so, and I am of the belief that it's not. That the journey, the meaning of being alive, the meaning of being human.
Yeah, you got to be present for that. You got to figure out what that means to you. You got to
valuable.
see what wells up inside to you when I say, all right, pull out your investment account statement. See that number? Take some white out and make it 0. Now, what is true? What do you and why? Where does that come from? And maybe does that lead to lightness when it comes to decision making during those periods of instability? Does that come with flexibility and openness? You've used your first 2 master keys. It is a period of instability, and you've already practiced. It is temporary, and it could be gone. And I'm going to use my process to have the biggest potential positive impact that I can have on me and mine through this process in a fashion that I'm proud of. And it still may not work.
And if it doesn't, was it all for nothing?
What's that mean? Am I worthless as a result? It's super hard. I go back to the athlete analogies, right? We praise them for the wins, right? And not the process that they went through.
Well, it's because there's, you sell out stadiums to watch the games, not the practices.
Nobody wants to work that hard, right?
Nobody wants to watch the practices.
No, they don't want to be up at 4 and, work out through 6 and then films through 9 and then meetings through noon and then fucking nap and then work out again and then practice. And, it's nobody wants that. They want to see and, applied.
And there's no audience for it either.
I would watch it.
Right? You would. No, these are great questions. I mean, and
That take us back to where you started this question. It feels crunchy right now.
Yeah.
It feels crunchy. And what are the master keys? Are they different? They're not unique. Process is a key term. Curiosity and openness. Can you get to that? Curiosity tends to loosen the hold that I think we have at certain moments during periods of stress and energy.
Yeah. Oh, it's not supposed to be easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it, and this would be a boring conversation, right? Well, you just do the thing that's easy, and everybody
Right.
wins.
Eat the pill. Eat the pill. It'll be fine.
You'll be fine.
Red pill, blue pill. Which one are we taking?
Ugh, that's such a weird conversation. Yeah, and there's a million different ways to go with it. And it's been, and even that's been co-opted by like super weird. So no, this is great. And the way that I help people regulate their nervous systems in other things is the same way you help people regulate. I mean, we can systems, the money, the life, like all of it, it's all the same. And being able to,
I don't think the goal matters. I don't think the goal matters, which is why I love your process, right? The tools and techniques that you can teach me, right? That I can apply in any domain that I'm interested in, exploring improvement and growth, and the flashes of flow states that I see have me convinced that can be productively applied, right? And applying it to money is a beautiful way to see it, to bring it to life. We could apply it to any area by and large, but it is uniquely challenging. You talked about delivering techniques for people who are really in high consequence environments, right? Police or military or crisis counselors or suicide. I mean, I'm not sure somebody dies if I do a bad job, right? But taking it to that extreme and understanding the regulation to, you're only going to have the skills that you have at the time that things go sideways.
Right. And you're not building them in that moment. You're only going to use what's in your pocket.
The hit in the mouth is coming.
Sure is. John, it's always good to talk to you. I love doing this. All right. Another good one. Thanks for listening to the Flow of Money podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Learn more about John and Dave at theflowofmoneypodcast.com. If you liked this episode, share it with someone who's ready to step into flow. If you're interested in sponsorship or collaboration, we'd love to hear from you. See you next time.
Hey, before you go, this is John O'Dea here with a quick note. I am affiliated with Raymond James Financial Services, Inc., member FINRA, SIPC, and my investment advisory services are offered through Raymond James Financial Services, Inc. Dave Gieselman, my partner, is not a registered broker-dealer and is independent of Raymond James Financial Services. Any opinions are mine and Dave's. These opinions are not necessarily those of Raymond James. Every investor situation is unique, and you should consider your investment goals, risk tolerance, and time horizon before making any investment decisions. Neither Raymond James Financial Services nor Raymond James Financial Advisors render any tax advice. Tax matters should be discussed with your tax advisor. This podcast is for investor education purposes only and is not intended to provide and should not be relied on for investment advice. Consult your investment advisor before making investment decisions.